Mr. Dorr? Mrs. Evans-Brockett?
Here.
Dr. Hallis? Here. Dr. Culler?
Here.
Mrs. Lofton? Mrs. Mayers?
Here.
Mrs. Roberts?
Here.
Dr. Weston?
Here.
Ms. White?
Here. Item 1.03, I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. That takes us to item 1.02 and public comment. I'm going to read procedures for public comment and then open the floor. The Board of Directors of the Perkiomen Valley School District accepts public comments from district residents and employees who wish to express opinions about any topic. Public comments may address the board in accordance with the law and board policy and procedures. Before presenting any comment, each speaker must state their name and municipality of residence within the district and/or the district building where they are employed. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes, and Dr. Russell will have a timer up on the screen. There is opportunity for public comment now and again at the end of the board agenda. No speaker will be permitted to comment more than once during the opening or closing sections. I shall maintain control of all meetings and may terminate a participant's comments when they are directed personally, abusive, or obscene, or when the time limit has exceeded. An individual who is causing a disruption may be required to leave the meeting or be muted in a virtual meeting. The purpose of public participation is to allow the board the opportunity to hear feedback from community members. It is not designed for a debate or discussion, so there will not be back and forth between board members and the community. You can certainly email us if you'd like to get a response. And the other thing I just want to announce is that tonight is our, we don't vote tonight. Tonight, anything that's on the agenda is just for discussion and questions. So voting will happen at next week's meeting. At this time, if there's anyone who'd like to come to the microphone and make a public statement.
Elementary students who are not yet eligible to be vaccinated for COVID-19. A year ago, our children had the option of accessing their PV education in designated virtual classes, an option I supported publicly from proposal. These students received full-time, uninterrupted direct instruction of the PV curriculum taught with the undivided attention of their PV teachers. In these K through 5 virtual classes, our children did not miss out on any direct instruction, nor did they have any disruptions at all due to COVID-19. They surpassed the proficiency standards for their grade levels. They bonded with their teachers and classmates. My request to the board is to allow our children to continue successfully learning virtually, as they did last year. To be clear, I mean with PV teachers teaching a PV curriculum both full-time and synchronously. North Penn School District is offering fully virtual elementary classes for the first time this year. Other districts now recognize how ideal this option would be. Access to every element of life virtually is perhaps the single silver lining of this pandemic. The potential for the potential for illness and disruption in all public settings still remains, and it may for a long time to varying degrees. We were slated for an in-person return just to see the Delta variant take cases from 0 to concerning. Without the same virtual offering of last year, we will be looking to educate our children out of the district, unfortunately. We are formerly a private school family, and this pandemic has showed us the value in the common courtesy that private school parents must abide by to remain part of that community. I believe that private school parents working together with respect is why they saw less cases of COVID in a year than we saw in a week. So if my children do end up going to school in person, it will be there. Many families are considering cyber schools that can offer them fully virtual synchronous learning. So please consider that loss of tax dollars without this option. The K-5 virtual classes took nothing away from the students in in-person learning. It actually removed kids from buses, cafeterias, and hallways to their benefit, serving as a form of mitigation in schools in itself. Please do not abandon the successful and predictable solution for this school year. Thank you for your time.
Robert Liggett, Perkiomen Township. Good evening. I speak tonight to an issue that many may not realize is even on tonight's agenda. I oppose all of the policy changes proposed affecting public comments, specifically the changes to Policy 903, but also Policy 006, limiting the comments to 60 minutes total in a meeting for both Section 1 and Section 10. I don't like the sign-up sheets that ask for the topic that you want to speak about. Perkiomen Valley School District historically has been one of the most open public comment policies compared to other districts. This changed because of the abuse of relatively open comment periods during all the other sections of the agenda. And therefore, the policies were changed in this previous year, both Policy 006 and Policy 903, which went into effect the last policy in April of this year. So now there are proposed to change these policies again. I understand that the changes to Policy 006 are required because of the new requirements of the Sunshine Law. But 903, the public comment period, there is no reason to change it. We've been operating under this system for several months now, where the public is allowed to comment on any topic when they come up to this podium at the beginning of the meeting, and not necessarily state the agenda item that they want there. I understand that this is a meeting that is done in public and not necessarily a public meeting, but the public is one of the most important parts of our school district. And I think that making sure that we have a system that is actually open to all our citizens coming up here and stating their concerns is important. And anything that can get in the way of that, whether it be a sign-up sheet, a time limit, I understand the 3 minutes, I'm not arguing about that, but all these things are something that I consider an impediment to free speech. And we all know that free speech is something that we, as a district, should stand up for. Because look at what's happened to us in the past when we've decided to not do that. Free speech by the public is an important part, and it's not a burden on you, the board, when we come up here to speak. It should be your privilege to hear our opinions because we're the public. So please, listen to us. The items that we have may not be on your agenda for that night, but if it's something that's important to us, take a few moments and listen to it. The whole conversation about the gender spectrum that came up in June was not on the agenda. And every single comment, including my own, would have been out of order under these new policies. I see no reason to change 903. We can leave it as is. And I hope that the rest of the public agrees with me on this, that it's important that we can speak out. Thank you.
I'm Ruth Ott from Perkiomen Township. I graduated in 2020 from PV, and I'm here tonight because I'm watching the school district start leaning heavily towards the left more and more, from LGBTQ+ videos getting shoved down students' throats and crazy mask guidelines. The school should not be promoting one political view over the other, and I'm going to share my thoughts and my personal experiences from my government class senior year where I was picked on for being a Republican. I knew it was my constitutional right to speak my personal opinions in the classroom, which students are encouraged to. But then afterwards, I felt like I had a target on my back. Now, I know that the teachers are not allowed to be sharing their personal political opinions, but this teacher would show very biased videos to sway our beliefs into the left political party. This teacher was very smart about it. They knew that most of us would be eligible to vote that upcoming election, and I know that they were purposely showing us these reoccurring biased videos from one news source that leans left in hopes of swaying my classmates who are not on top of their politics or those who are undecided. Some examples of me being politically targeted was when I was presenting one of my current events. I went to show this one video of a congressman who was sworn under oath, and my teacher questioned me if I actually wanted to show it. When I said yes, and he started to play it, then soon paused, trying to encourage me not to play the rest, and gave me a hard time throughout the rest of the video. Would I have been questioned multiple times, given snarky comments, and put through such a hard time by my teacher if I was sharing something supporting his political party? I don't think so. Another example was when I was caught up by my teacher and he claimed that the information that I had shared with the class was incorrect and I was wrong. I was told that I was positive my information was correct, but he told me it wasn't, and if I wanted to prove him wrong, I had to print out the evidence from an article. So that's exactly what I did, and the facts that I presented him did prove him wrong. But the point in all this is that if I happened to be sharing the same political belief as him and promoting the liberal side, he would not have given me such a hard time. He didn't call out any of my liberal classmates or ever question them with the intentions of trying to make a fool out of them. But he did this to me multiple times. And I know I'm not the only student who has experienced this kind of behavior. It creates an uncomfortable environment, and that's when you see less and less students express themselves and participate in the classroom. More recently, I hear about these videos that were promoting gender confusion being shown in the middle schools at homeroom. Students are confused after being told they can be different genders or even classified as no gender at all. Why is this material being taught? It wasn't like this years ago. There's no reason for it. Why weren't the parents informed beforehand to get permission? Why weren't they given the option to opt their child out from watching that? If I decide to have children someday, I certainly don't want them to be taught this. And I know I speak for the majority when I say this. I don't want to send them to a school district to be gender confused. You go to school to learn facts. The LGBTQ+ community is treated extra special, and now the straight student is being bullied, for example, not becoming their ally or not wearing rainbow colors on a certain day. This is clearly discrimination for not supporting their lifestyle. I have faith in God, and if I go out and share my values, it's seen as less important compared to a member of the LGBTQ+ community because the school puts them on a pedestal. Just because I may not approve of your lifestyle doesn't mean I can't respect and be civil. And another thing regarding COVID, the mask should be optional. Evidence is now coming out that masks are harmful to our children's health. No child should be subject to a mask for 30 hours a week. There should be a choice. If the parents and their kids feel
You
safe,
can wrap up your comments, please.
if they feel safe, they should not be allowed to wear a mask. If they don't feel safe, they should not have to wear, yeah, okay.
I'm Ashley Reese, PV. My questions are rhetorical, by the way. Are you aware of the percentage of children in our district?
I'm sorry to interrupt. You said PV.
Park Valley.
What township are you?
Back.
Thank you.
Sorry.
We need that for sunshine law
First time.
purposes. We'll restart your time.
Thank you.
We need to make sure that's in our minutes. Thank you.
Are you aware of the percentage of children in our district that have an IEP? Because the last board meeting that I attended virtually, you were unaware of the amount of dyslexic children in this district, and it was around 20%. So what's the overall percentage of the IEP group? And is our curriculum supportive of that, or is the reason so many children struggle because of the curriculum? This is a big issue for me because my daughter went to a PV school, and I'm really sorry if I get upset. And regardless of how many times I brought it to their attention, including on the very first day, I was told she was fine. Education should be individualized. Children do not learn on a standard level, yet they are tested on one. She was in fact not fine, and she now does have an IEP because I pulled her from this district and put her in a cyber school. However, there's more opportunity for her in a brick and mortar. I came from the Philadelphia School District, and I'll be honest, I was less than impressed with our first PV experience, and the more people I talk to, I get the same response. Are you aware of how many children are bullied on a day-to-day basis in our schools? I ask this question because at the last board meeting that I listened to, you were more concerned with the type of student that was bullied, rather than the fact that any student was being bullied for any reason at all. Bullying is unacceptable. We have a no-tolerance policy to bullying, don't we? However, my child was a victim of bullying along with many others we know. Again, many times I brought it to the attention of the teacher and principal at school. My child was invited to utilize her time to seek counseling. Yet the children that bullied her continued to bully her, and we never saw a permanent outcome because of COVID. Is the PV problem-solving method to brush it under the rug until it goes away? I'm a parent that will not go away. My final concern is the mask mandate. My son has a severe speech delay. We can barely understand him without a mask. When he speaks, he sounds like he's mumbling or as if he already has his hand over his mouth. If you put a mask over his face, nobody will understand him. Children with speech delays need to see words and letters form, sound, and articulate clearly. They need to be able to utilize their mouth and learn to communicate effectively, and they do this in the classroom by talking to their friends and teachers, along with many other things. This doesn't only affect my son, it affects any child with an IEP. I dare you to challenge that. A mask mandate is detrimental to our children's emotional and social well-being. One of the main concerns with parents about masking their children was that they were rebreathing in CO2. According to the CDC, CO2 is small enough to escape the cloth mask opening on the sides of a child's face. Therefore, it is not a risk to their health. A CO2 molecule is 0.33 nanometers big. A COVID-19 molecule is 0.1 to 0.3 nanometers big, making it smaller. Those cloth masks won't keep it from escaping. Furthermore, if you believe a vaccine is effective so strongly that you still need to wear a mask, then it should not matter whether or not my student wears one. As a parent, I'm almost done, I have 3 sentences. As a parent, I am well aware of the risk, which is why we have drilled the importance of hand washing and hygiene. A person's immune system is their first line of defense against the virus. It remembers and attacks. A mask does not do that. A mask does not protect 100% of the time. I trust my body. I teach my children to do the same and trust theirs. You have no say over that. You all seem to be very concerned with political views versus the actual problems that need attention. So here's mine. My body, my choice.
Dawn D. Fury, Trapboro. Many members of our community were happy to see that our school district was proposing masks optional for this upcoming school year. I am here to speak on behalf of parents and children alike should you propose to change this plan. Please keep the following things in mind while making any important decisions for our children. All summer long, children have been going to parks, restaurants, playdates, camps, beaches, amusement parks with little to no issues. The CDC data shows that the K through 12 mortality rate from and with COVID is 0. Let me repeat that again, 0. The survivability of COVID rate is 99.997%. It's been mentioned many times at these meetings. On June 3rd, 2021, Dr. Richard Lorraine of the Montgomery County Health Department stated that the use of a surgical mask was 0 to 15% effective. Masks have greatly affected our children's social, emotional, mental, and physical health over the past year. Let's not forget that you all required our children to wear masks during recess and athletics in 90-degree heat last year. I ask you, members of the school board, how would you feel running around a track or participating in an athletic event in 90-degree heat with your mouth covered and your nose covered and restricting your breathing? Has anyone asked our children how these practices made them feel? Why are we not considering their feelings? We most definitely should be. Many parents, including myself, have requested the data that shows that our children wearing masks all day long with little to no mask breaks have no short-term or long-term side effects and risks. I never received any response from our district. By wearing a mask for 40-plus hours a week for the past year, our children were essentially participating in a clinical trial that contained many risks. Masks are a major threat to our children's development. They impede on their social and emotional interactions. Fear is detrimental to our immune systems. Masks restrict our children's breathing. They cause anxiety, panic attacks, affect their concentration, promote headaches, cause fatigue, increase CO2, hypercapnia, irregular heartbeat, and much more. Where has all the care and concern been for our children who suffer these issues at the hand of adults? Mandating our children to wear a medical device that comes with many risks and provides little benefit should not be a decision made solely by our school board. Our children have every right to receive their education and exercise their freedom to breathe at the same time. There is always a risk of children choking in the cafeteria. Should we refuse them food? There's always a risk of a bus accident. Do we stop allowing students the privilege to ride a bus? The answer is no. So why would we refuse our children the right to breathe fresh air with such a minuscule chance of them being affected by COVID? We cannot take back the harm we caused our children this past year, but we can all learn from it. For our children's sake, let us all continue to do better and give each and every parent and child in our school district the choice that we all deserve. Thank you.
Good evening. Stephanie Ott, Perkiomen Township. My husband and I have 5 children, 3 of which have graduated from Perk Valley and 2 that are still in the high school. In reference to the video shown at Middle School East in June, I'm disgusted that such material would be presented to these young minds. And I know that I speak for the majority when I say this. This is only breeding gender confusion to such young minds. The fact that parents could not preview and give consent is disturbing. I personally know a family that experienced a situation. Their son came home and said one day, "I think I'm bisexual." And the mother said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, at school they teach that they're extra special, and I want to be extra special." This is very disturbing. We raise our kids to be respectful and kind, but we also teach them values and right from wrong. In regards to masking, it is imperative that masks are optional. The school is not in a position to make a medical decision for my child. We as parents get to make those decisions. In children ages 0 to 19 years, more lost their lives to pneumonia this year than to COVID, and previous years, more lost their lives to the flu. We never asked children to wear masks during flu season before, so why are we now? Dr. Mark McDonald, a psychiatrist, states, and I quote, "Children have been medically and psychologically harmed from mandatory mask mandates. There is no evidence that masks protect children or adults. Children do not benefit from masks. They have only hurt them. Children are constantly touching their faces, adjusting their mask, and introducing more germs to their facial area. Masks have contributed to impetigo, streptococcal infections, coughing, sickness in the throat, conjunctivitis, panic attacks, and allergic reactions, to name a few. Every thoughtful, rational adult knows that children do not need to have their faces covered. Studies out are showing that children do not transfer infection to adults. There is substantial evidence that with masks, children are being harmed physically and emotionally. Dr. McDonald states that depression and anxiety have gone up 300 to 400% in the last year. Teenage and child suicide have increased. Masks do nothing to help us medically. They are absolutely useless, but are merely a symbol of fear and anxiety. The psychological effects of masks are absolutely damaging. Dr. McDonald states that we are seeing a generation of children who are learning by mask wearing, mask enforcement, that everything is scary and dangerous. Their emotional development becomes stunted, they become scared and phobic, and are unable to associate with people outside the home to engage in conversation. We are raising an entire generation of young people who are going to become afraid to live outside of the basement. Masks are destroying our country, and we need to take them off our children's faces and allow them to roam and breathe freely.
Pam DeStefano, Perkiomen Township. My message today is parent choice. The PSEA has stood in opposition to parental rights and choice on topics like CRT, radical gender studies, and the masking and other medical decisions of our children. PSEA President Rich Askey said on May 27th, and I quote, "We are the experts. We know better than anyone else what our students need," end quote. But the students to which he refers are in fact our children. I oppose his views. Our children don't need his governing. Parents have the ultimate authority. We know what's best for our children, and we do not co-parent with the government. Circumventing parental authority leads to tension and causes parents to lose trust in public education. Public education is taxpayer funded, and many concerned parents in our community have very little say, basically facing taxation without representation. On July 29th, Montgomery County shifted its guidance back to recommending universal indoor masking for K through 12. Guidance and recommendations are not laws. We have a personal responsibility to advocate for our own health. Parents advocate for the health of their children. On June 3rd, Dr. Richard Lorraine, the medical director at the Montgomery County Office of Public Health, gave a talk entitled Unmasking the Confusion. There's Truth in the Science. He says masks, cloth or surgical, are only 0 to a maximum of 15% effective against spreading COVID. He goes on to say, although masks don't do a whole lot to improve people, do a whole lot of improvement, people are reluctant to give them up because of psychological dependency on them. It's a form of comfort, but doesn't provide much protection. This is his words, Dr. Richard Lorraine. Could this be what's going on here in our district? It's not my child's job to comfort adults who are terrified of COVID. It's not the job of the school to force our children to wear a medical device that hasn't been proven safe or effective. So if masking children isn't effective and actually hinders breathing, what is their purpose? Why aren't we following science? We need to stop keeping children in perpetual fear of a virus that rarely affects them. COVID rarely affects children. We need to stop keeping healthy children out of school. Since the last day of school in June, there has only been one COVID-related death in all of Montgomery County, and I'm not minimizing that death. I'm asking, when will it be safe enough? What do the numbers need to be? 0? Because we're not going to reach that goal or eliminate COVID. This virus isn't going away, but now is not the time for masking and social distancing and contact tracing or closing schools. Now's the time for personal responsibility and parental authority. We are personally accountable for our own health and not that of anyone else. If that weren't true, then I should mandate everyone into a health, nutrition, and fitness plan and force them to quit smoking or other unhealthy habits. Don't we all take calculated risks every day? Mask optional does not mean that nobody can wear a mask. It means every parent decides what's best for their child. Mask optional is the only way to put the responsibility on each parent and uphold parental choice. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tara Wisniewski from Perkiomen Township, and I'm here to voice my opposition to the critical race theory. I found a guide from the abolitionistteachingnetwork.org. I don't know if CRT bases its curriculum on this guide, but the mindset is strikingly similar. CRT is a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's racism disguised as anti-racism. Its advocates use a lot of window dressing to make it appear as if CRT cares about equality, when really it's the theory that race is critical. Grabbing a few points from the guide, under hiring and support, we need to hire, support, and retain Black, brown, and indigenous teachers, paraprofessionals, school counselors, and other personnel. Why does it have to be a certain color? Why can't we go with the most qualified? We need to offer free anti-racist therapy for white educators and support staff. Why is it assumed that white educators are racist? Can other races not be racist? We need to reduce class sizes so that Black, brown, and indigenous children can thrive. This implies that Black, brown, and indigenous students can't cut it in a larger classroom, but white students can handle a large class. That right there is racist. What a way to devalue a child based on their color. Teach them that they're a victim and can't compete on level ground. We need to remove all punitive or disciplinary practices that spirit murder Black, brown, and indigenous children. What is this? What is spirit murdering? Discipline murders the spirit, and it only does so to children of color. We need to build a school culture that engages in healing and advocacy. That's great. But to do this, it requires a commitment to learning from students, families, and educators who disrupt whiteness and other forms of oppression. This is more racist talk, flat out telling students of color that they should judge people by skin color and know that if the color is white, the person will oppress them. Under discipline, we need to remove any and all police and policing from schools. What, no discipline at all? We need to invest in state-of-the-art green school facilities that are worthy of Black, brown, and indigenous children. What makes a school worthy of white versus others? Is this what we want to teach our children? This kind of curriculum is dangerous and will do nothing to enhance racial relations. On the contrary, CRT would prove to set us back in terms of social justice and racial relations. Thank you.
Tim Cavanaugh from Trapboro. All right. First, I want to say that I believe in every parent's right to raise their kids as they see fit, in a way that reflects their beliefs and values, whether I agree with their beliefs or not. I believe in treating everybody with kindness and respect, regardless of their race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or gender, and I expect my children to do the same. With that being said, I am having very strong concerns regarding the direction PV is going with some of its curriculum, particularly regarding gender and sexuality. I understand the noble intent of wanting the district to feel more inclusive for a small portion of the population, but it feels like the effect it may have on everybody else is either being completely overlooked or just not cared about at all. It seems that even questioning it gets you labeled as a bigot and uninformed, and you get tuned out. I don't believe that that does much to create unity in this district. In fact, it seems to be proving to do the complete opposite. I can't speak for every parent in the PV school district or kid. I can only speak about my own kids and my own experience. From my experience with my own kids, it seems to me that kids are pretty close to a clean slate when they're very young. They really don't know much about anything. They trust their parents or other trusted adults, such as teachers, to learn literally everything, from academics to moral values. I was recently informed of some slides that were part of the PV School District Summer Academy to start being taught as curriculum in our schools. They were regarding gender and sexuality, and they weren't about teaching acceptance. They seemed to me to be very clearly intended to teach the content as facts. Regardless of what you say the intent is, I am smart enough to make my own decisions on what kind of impact it may have on the mind of a young child before and during a time in their life that can be very awkward and confusing for them in the first place. One slide showed symbols and the definition of those symbols. Since I only have 3 minutes, these are only a couple different definitions I saw. Polyamory. Polyamory is having multiple intimate partners at a time with the informed consent of all involved. Anyone, regardless of their sexual preference, can be polyamorous. One slide defined gender as one of those, quote, one of those things everyone thinks they understand, but most people don't. Like Inception, gender isn't binary. It's not either or. In many cases, it's both and. A bit of this, a clash of that, unquote. I also did see what looked like a gender propaganda piece that was shown at the Middle School East, where the old man, portrayed as behind the times and ignorant, was told, quote, back in your day, most people only understood the world as just boys and girls, but we know gender is more complex than that. When you're born, your sex is assigned in a medical way, but the sex on your birth certificate may not necessarily reflect your gender identity, unquote. Again, I don't care what you tell me your intentions are with this stuff. I'm smart enough and still have the freedom to make up my own mind about what type of impact this could have on my own kids. I have compassion for any kid who might be going through an identity crisis or one who feels confident about being transgender, and I believe in treating everyone with kindness, respect, and supporting everybody. I'm willing to help or support these kids in a lot of ways, but trying to spark an identity crisis in my own kids is not one of them. I have 2 boys that both seem completely happy and confident being boys, and I intend to keep raising them that way. My most important role as a parent is to raise and support my kids in a way that is best for their happiness and health, physically, emotionally, and mentally. I'm not sending them to a school that's going to try to spark an identity crisis in them, whether intentionally or not. I really don't feel like it is in my kids' best interest to attend Perk Valley schools anymore, and I did choose to pull them out to put them in private school because of this.
Hi, I'm Lisa McHale, Perkiomen Township. I'm a resident and a taxpayer, and my children actually attend a local private school. I've had my now 14-year-old twins in private school since kindergarten. They're going to be 8th graders this fall. Many years ago, before deciding to place my kids in private, I attended school board meetings here at PV to get a feel for how things worked. I could see clearly back then what I am seeing now, as I've been watching closely over these last several months. What I see is a blatant lack of parental control, any collaboration between the school board, teachers, and parents on academic policy and/or health and safety policy. Transparency continues to seem almost non-existent today, as it did back in 2013. Back in 2010 and 2013, 2012, when Common Core was being implemented, neither parents or even teachers were consulted on this outcome-based federal program, as it was unrightfully imposed on our children. Today, it appears that the results of Common Core have failed our students. Why? Because it was implemented with no foresight, no data, no studies, no proof that this type of curriculum or program could benefit our children. Today and over the last several months, I've listened to parents' public comments, pouring out their hearts and souls for these kids and for their best interests, pleading with you, the school board administrators who have been elected to work for them. As public servants, you are expected to carry out the parents' best wishes. Instead, these parents are met with blank stares, barely a nod, and zero response to any of their concerns. On top of these concerns over masking policy and curriculum, there has, once again, been no foresight, zero studies available to support how these policies will benefit the students, and a total disregard for how parents feel about it. As far as masking, PPE, personal protection equipment, is just that. It's for your own personal protection. Masking is to protect the individual. It does not prevent the spread. There are zero studies on masking children that provide otherwise. Throwing around academic policy, including equity, diversity, and inclusion, are in fact critical race theory. In the public school setting, it is an unstudied, untried, outcome-based ideology that seeks to derail students while elevating other students based on economics, race, and/or sexual orientation. It's Marxism 101. I have heard many parents speak out against masking kids this fall and against implementing curriculum, activities, and programs that would promote the notion of CRT. I have also seen parents who support these programs full on. Bottom line, parents should be able to choose what they feel is best for their kids, not what you think is best for your political ideologies or agendas. That's not your job. You work for the taxpayers and the taxpayers that elected you. As a resident of Perkiomen Valley School District, my personal tax dollars and I stand for parent choice. Thank you.
My name is Ann Bridey. I live in Lower Frederick Township. I'm really here tonight to ask for consideration of providing a virtual option like we had last year. It's becoming increasingly clear basically by the minute that I cannot send my child into a physical school building this year. So if the Perkiomen Valley Schools can't provide a online learning similar to last year, I'm going to have to find an alternative. So appreciate your time. Thank you.
Rick Sames, Perkiomen Township. I believe all Americans should be free to live their lives and raise their children as they see fit. I believe all parents and children should have the choice on whether to or not to wear a mask. There's no evidence that long-term mask wearing by children will not have long-term health effects on them. No child should be suppressed or smothered behind a mask that they do not want to wear. Children need to be free in order to learn.
Danielle Dury, Perkiomen Township. The last almost year and a half has really opened my eyes personally about the business of education. It's really shined a light on how students are dead last, how very little of what's been done in the past 18 months has been done in the best interest of the kids and their education. But my eyes are wide open now. I spent the last 6 years of our time in this school district volunteering in my kids' classes at the school, not just to help out, but to get to know the people who are around my kids, because I wanted to trust them. I wanted to know who was molding my kids. And I can say positively that all of those who were in charge of, helping my kids foster their creativity, their confidence, their knowledge, and their strengths were amazing men and women. And I thank them. But my trust in the decision makers is gone. Gone. I know that the dollar amount, the value on each of our children in the district means a lot more than the whole child. I learned that. Thank you for opening my eyes. I have learned that pacifying parents is a well-crafted art. Parents' voices mean very little. So little, in fact, that you're attempting to silence us in the community further with item 9.01 and attempting to limit and censor the public's voice. It appears the only language you seem to understand is money. And the only thing that will motivate you are for parents to leave the district. And by the public and the parents suing you. So my family will no longer participate in this game, and my kids are not pawns for you to use. Thank you.
Does this come out? Hi, Donna Rudolph from Lower Frederick. I'd like to poll the community here. Oh, this goes out to my daughter, Victoria, who I'm representing and why I'm here. So for the community that has taken their time out to come here tonight, can I please see everyone stand up that it is for parent choice and let the board hear your voice? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. First off, I would like to thank Dr. Russell and the
Sorry
administration.
to interrupt. If you could start with your name and your
I
municipality.
apologize.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's Matt Taylor, Perkiomen Township. First off, I would like to thank Dr. Russell and the administration for accepting my children's mask waiver and setting a precedent for children who cannot wear masks to attend school mask-free. My wife and I saw a huge benefit in my children's health once the masks were no longer hindering their ability to receive oxygen. I expect that mask waiver form will protect my child from having to unnecessarily mask again, as nothing has changed from that point to this. My children do not do well in a virtual learning environment, so that is definitely not going to work for us. Being unmasked and in person is the only option that I am going to accept. I expect the board and the administration to make sure that children that cannot wear masks are protected from the verbal abuse that my son received last spring. I assure you, my children are respectful and accepting of everyone. They should receive the same in turn. It is not my children's responsibility to make themselves sick so that others can feel a false sense of security that the cloth masks provide. Again, there is no information that cloth masks provide any protection to the wearer or anyone else around them. I expect that my boys see the same equitability and inclusion that all minorities might receive, because now they're in the minority. They're kids that can't wear masks at a school full of kids with masks. It is sad that the powers that be continue to find ways to discriminate against common sense. My boys are healthy, athletic, and participated in sports all summer. All summer long, they participated in sports. 3 different baseball teams, 2 different leagues, shaking hands, interacting with kids, not a sniffle. I trust my kids' immune system to fight off any illness that may cross their path. My children have been out in the community working since the lockdown started without as much as a sniffle. Once again, out in the community working, essential workers. My daughter worked at McDonald's. She was essential, right? Shows what's important. McDonald's. Again, thank you for approving their exemption form, Dr. Russell. I hope that the exemption forms will continue to be enforced. And I thank everyone for their time tonight.
Are there any other public comments at this time? Seeing none, I thank all of you that spoke tonight. We're going to move on to section 2, reports. We're going to start with 2.01, our student liaisons report, and I'd like to welcome Mr. Christian Seibel to the board. We had Matt Schaefer here last month, so we're glad you could join us. Do you have anything to report for us this month?
Yeah, I do. Is it on? Cool. Okay. Yeah, I'm Christian Seibel. It's a pleasure to be here. I came down from camp. I wanted to make this meeting. I'm excited. Right now, there's not too much happening on the student side of things. We're enjoying a nice, peaceful summer after an arguably way too exciting school year. Recently, AP scores came out, and Matt and I, although Matt couldn't make it tonight, we'd like to congratulate all of our AP students for their outstanding performance in all of the AP programs. This wasn't just thanks to the perseverance spirit of our Vikings, but also the exceptional PV teachers that continued to give the best education our students could ask for throughout some tough times. Aside from that, there's not too much going on. Our PV athletes are getting ready to rock fall sports this year, as always, and the marching band is practicing to match that Viking spirit with exceptional performances. Right now, the student body is really just trying to prepare for both a great school year, while also stretching the summer out as long as possible. Finally, I'd real quick like to point out the exceptional changes to the PV webpage. Matt and I were putting together this report, and we opened up the webpage, and we were shocked at how user-friendly and easy it was to use. Obviously, there's still a little bit of stuff that needs to be populated, but other than that, I can tell this is going to make it way easier for students, teachers, and parents. So we'd like to thank you guys for that. That's all for tonight, and have a nice day.
Thank you, Mr. Seibel. Item 2.02 is the President's report. I do not have a report tonight, so we'll move on to 2.03 and the Superintendent's report. I'll turn it over to Dr. Russell.
Thank you, Mrs. Evans-Brockett. So points of interest for me this evening include a shout out, a little discussion about our summer programming that's winding down, fall activities that are gearing up, opening day for students and teachers, and then our Hall of Fame. And I have shout out on this agenda, just to follow up Mr. Seibel's comments. We'll give a shout out to Dr. Tara Parr. She is here behind us and with us tonight. She is the administrator who is leading that website transition for us and for our school district. And it's nice to hear the positive feedback. We're interested in the feedback that helps us to know what will support your use of that website. So thank you for sharing that. So Sonali Shandy is a rising senior preparing for her 12th grade year, and she's been busy this summer. She participated in the 100th annual convention of the American Legion Auxiliary Department for Pennsylvania, and she will spend some time focusing on government, how government operates, and how she can help younger individuals learn the same thing. So congratulations to Sonali. She's been busy this summer, and we're proud of her efforts and what she's achieved. Thank you. Thank you very much. So summer learning is winding down. These are some pictures of some of our students that have been invested all summer and are looking forward to their last day, Wednesday this week, so that they have a little bit of downtime before we prepare to welcome them back August 30th. They've done a great job. So I appreciate the efforts on the part of our students as well as our staff that have served in the various summer programs we've had up and running this year. Fall activities, Mr. Seibel mentioned, we're gearing up. So we're winding down some of that summer programming. It ends this week for all of our students participating and gearing up for fall activities. Sports and marching band are two key ones here at the secondary level. So this schedule gives you a sense of what's happening. Next Monday, we have heat acclimation for our high school football teams. And then all high school PIAA fall sports begin on August 16th, which is right around the corner. Heat acclimation for our middle school football players is on August 23rd, and then middle school sports begin on that first day of school for students, August 30th. Marching band has a big competition in our stadium on October 9th. So we're gearing up and getting ready. Once August hits, it seems like the summer is almost over. Things really get moving here on campus for our students. So opening day for staff is August 25th. And each year, we typically have a welcome back meeting for all of our staff across the district from all of our employee groups. Now, last year was different. We didn't have that. But we are planning to have that conclave this year. It will either be in the auditorium at East, or it'll be out in the stadium, or it'll be in the competition gym here in the high school so that we can spread out. And we take some time to go over some of the important aspects that we're thinking about in the upcoming year. We welcome new staff, we recognize veteran staff, and we talk about some of the things we're focused on in the upcoming year. Our school board members are welcome to attend that opening day set of ceremonies or conversations. Students begin their school year on August 30th. That's before Labor Day this year. So we're gearing up. I also just wanted to mention, because we're starting to inform our Hall of Fame recipients from last year about the reception and ceremony that's planned for October 22nd. So these individuals that will be inducted this year were actually nominated and voted in last year, but we couldn't hold the ceremony due to the circumstances of the pandemic. We are planning to hold that Hall of Fame ceremony and recognize the 5 individuals that have or will be inducted into our Hall of Fame. This is something that started in 2018, and it allows the school district to recognize some important individuals who have contributed in some special way to the school district from a variety of roles or positions in the district that have really brought value and served as models for future students and staff. So, just to plant that seed and save the date for October 22nd. It's also our homecoming, our annual homecoming football game. And with that, it ends my report.
Thank you, Dr. Russell. Moving on to 2.04, the solicitor's report. Mr. Subers, do you have any report tonight?
I do not.
Thank you. 2.05, board and district committee reports. Board members actively participate in the following committees. Available minutes and notes of committee activities are included in this agenda item following the chart. Does any board member have anything of note to report? I believe we only had policy in the last month. Okay. Moving on to section 3, the consent agenda, item 3.01. Items that represent standard routine business of the board are included in the consent agenda. Board members may request to have any items removed for discussion. The consent items are listed, and additional items may be added during this session. Section 4, education. Dr. Kolar, please.
Thank you, Mrs. Evans-Brockett. Item 4.01 is the education update, so I'll turn it over to Mrs. Smith.
Good evening, everyone. Okay. So we have a couple of topics this evening. I will do the first couple of them on summer programming, federal programs, and then we will turn it over to Dr. Russell for some information on our health and safety plan. So starting out with summer programs, you saw some pictures from Dr. Russell. The LIFT program, or Learning is Fun Together, our enrichment programs have ended. They ended last week. We are, as Dr. Russell mentioned, finishing up with our remediation programs this week. But lots of great things from the kids, just lots of pictures of some of the items that they were building. Many of the camps were focused on like a design learning theme, and we partnered with Penn State University for our elementary, and Dr. Clune helped us to partner with some of our organizations in our community for our middle school as well. So just lots of happy faces, lots of positive feedback from our families as well. We had 940 students involved in what I'll call the K-12 LIFT programming. You can just see some numbers here in terms of the number of kids in remediation, enrichment, credit recovery, as well as we had a virtual camps offered through MCIU, and we had 40 students in district take advantage of that as well. We also had summer library hours, and we have one more date coming up on August 17th that we invite our families to come out. But you can see we have had over 400 books checked out from the 2 dates that we have had so far. So we're looking forward to one more time and seeing if we have additional turnout on that day. An extended school year on behalf of special education, Dr. Boyd included some, again, similarly, some information and pictures of our students in extended school year, which is through special education. Again, eligibility is determined by the IEP team based upon the 7 factors, and really the programming is based upon their IEP goals to support their maintenance of skills. And so we had 63 students participate in programming here at South in a centers-based approach, and we had 18 students who received some programming through the MCIU, again, based upon the goals and what their needs were. And again, just some pictures of some of our students and the learning and the staff that are supporting them in ESY that occurred at South. And our MCIU program was a little bit more based on, those work skills and transition activities. You can see here that we've got the barista buddies and some of our students helping to, provide refreshments as well as learning, upkeep and cleaning and so forth. Moving into our federal programs, it's that time of year where we will be doing our consolidated application for Titles 1, 2, and 4. So just an update on our allocations, and you will notice that in Title I, our allocation has about doubled from last year, what we typically have gotten. Not sure if that will continue in the future. But you can see we have $472,000, and we have a little bit of carryover. You are allowed to carry over any funds that you have not expended in the year. We have about $23,000 of that, and mainly was due to COVID in that we didn't have necessarily all of the staffing in place or could fill all of those positions. But you can see in the chart on the left basically how this is broken out. Title I is really a program that supports our schools that qualify based upon free and reduced lunch. For this coming year, Schwenksville South and PV West are our 3 qualifying, and they have historically been so. So we have the majority of these funds will actually go into salary and benefits for staff, which is typical in any year, but we will be trying to even increase our salary and benefits for staff coming in those Title I schools moving into the 21-22 year. For Title II, this is primarily used for financial assistance for professional development across the district, and you can see our allocation is about $10,000 higher than it was this past year. We do have a non-public amount that any schools that qualify that are able to have some of that. The remaining funds are really spent on professional development or consultants to move forward our mission statement, as well as a portion of that is used to support the Linkit Navigator. Linkit is our data warehouse, and the Navigator piece to that is the professional development, the data analysis side of that to help our staff and administrators really be able to work with that tool. Title III is actually, we have our part of the consortium through MCIU, so it's a small allocation here, but it is pretty standard, around $2,000 or slightly above, and this supports our English language learners across the district. And so we use mainly this on some minimal field trips that the students go on, some software to help support their needs in the classroom, and any curricular resources that they may need. And we participate, as I said, with the IU, receive professional development and networking through the IU. And then Title IV, this last piece is, as you can see in the description, well-rounded education, improving school conditions, using technology to improve the academic achievement and digital literacy of our students. There's a couple areas that can fit into this. Our allocation is slightly less this coming year, about $18,000, and we have typically used that. Again, there's a non-public share. We support our day of service that occurs in February, and that community service with our students. And then again, we will have some funds allocated for social emotional learning resources to support our curriculum, as well as consultants that may possibly help us to move forward our mission statement. Moving into the ARP ESSER, this was presented last month. There are not any changes from what we presented last month. We still have this broken into 4 areas for the entirety of close to $1.8 million. And just again, to kind of break it down, we have our learning loss, which is a required portion. 20% is required to be put into learning loss. We have identified that for summer programming for next year, COVID compensatory services, which is for special education, and that before and after school programming, including the transportation to hopefully have activity buses. In social emotional learning, about $664,000 spread across some staffing areas that you have previously approved. We've also had some conversations about contracted nursing to help support as we continue through the pandemic, employee assistance program, and then some other areas to support the social emotional needs of our students and our staff. Curricular resources, mainly the largest allocations going to English language arts and math to look for additional resources and research-based interventions for those 2 areas, K to 12, with really looking at our secondary levels. We have a lot of resources and supports at the elementary, but looking for those interventions at the secondary. And then you can see some additional resources there. And on the right, the last category of classroom resources, we still have allocated some funds for flexible seating and then additional technology hardware, whether that be the interactive panels or the wireless projectors. So you will see both federal programs and the ESSER on the board agenda for approval this month, should you, be interested in approving that. Enrollments then, just to kind of be standard with what we've done the last couple of months, is just an update for you on what our enrollments look like based upon August here. There's really nothing of note in terms of our elementary programming. All of our numbers are well within our class size guidelines and continue to be. Our middle school enrollments, this again doesn't look very different from the July report. We continue to watch that 7th grade, but that has actually decreased slightly from, I believe, the July numbers. And then our high school, again, looks relatively similar to the past months. We have our virtual enrollments. These are from our May survey that we did of our families. The numbers have not changed from what was presented last month. We did check the survey on July 8th just to ensure that we had everybody captured. And you can see about 111 families at that time. These students are still counted in the other enrollment reports that you've seen in case we, have changes back to being on site. So our timeline at this point is hopefully next week after we have a discussion about the health and safety plan. It is our desire to really begin to have a verification from our families on their instructional mode. So based upon the conversation this evening, we are considering sending that out this week and asking parents to verify the mode that they put in the survey. So you would receive a letter saying, Laurie Smith, your child has indicated that they are interested in virtual instruction. If this is correct, you don't need to do anything. If it is incorrect, there will be a form that you can request your change so that by the next time that we show these to you, we will have more accurate numbers if anything has changed in families' desires since the time they completed it in May. And I will turn it over to Dr. Russell.
Mrs. Smith, and so then hopefully we'll have those numbers for next week, and then we can have further conversations about what virtual options may be available. If our numbers increase, we can do some movement of staff as needed or that type of thing, correct?
Yes. So our initial timeline was to hopefully send out that information tomorrow, but I think we want to hear the conversation tonight so that we can share anything with our parents to help make them make informed decisions. Our deadline would be an August 12th deadline. So our board meeting is on the 9th. So we may not have heard back from everybody, but we can certainly give you an update by the 9th on how many changes maybe we are seeing. We were also planning to hold a parent night on the 10th so that it's after the board meeting and any approval so that we can talk about virtual programming as well as we can talk about any changes in the health and safety plan. We have updated our website. If you go there and you click on the schools, you'll see Viking Academy and you can find the drop down and you will see what the programming looks like both at elementary, middle, and high school as of now, the programs that we have available. But yes, should these numbers change, we can certainly talk about and we've brainstormed some ideas. Dr. Kohler?
So can we talk about maybe moving that deadline up from August 12th? Because if we're voting next week, there won't be any other meeting potentially before we may have to offer some kind of different virtual option if the numbers shift significantly.
We certainly could consider that. I will defer to Dr. Russell on the timing and obviously to the board. We wanted to ensure families had enough time to digest any changes to health and safety to make their decision.
Yeah, we have talked about it as almost a chicken and egg sort of situation. We're really trying to make sure our parents have the information they need to make an informed decision about how they would like to see their student participate next year. However, as a board, I know that you would appreciate consideration for the resources we might need to dedicate to virtual instruction. So it is a bit of a challenging situation. We're hoping that tonight gives us a pretty good sense of the direction we'll take. I know that you are not anticipating action tonight, but we're hoping that we can at least leave feeling better informed about the direction we will take or propose to you more formally next week if there are changes, and then start to survey our families. We could also extend that, and I don't know, with the rate at which some of the changes are happening from the guiding agencies, if it would be helpful or a consideration for the board to schedule another meeting in August at some point anyway. If things continue to shift in the ways that they did last week, it may be helpful to meet once more before the school year begins, and then that would allow you that conversation if necessary.
Ms. White?
Thank you. I just wanted to acknowledge that in the survey that goes out, what I have heard a lot about is not only looking in anticipation for what the health and safety guidelines will be, but also what the mode of delivery will be. So I just want to make sure that the survey captures the data that we need to make those decisions, and that way it's structured that should the health and safety plan be X, then we will be able to provide Y or Z. And I just want to make sure that because what I feel like I'm hearing a lot of is, if masking is, for example, optional, parents may have a feeling that they would maybe want to keep their children home. However, they don't want their children to have a virtual option that's not what was last year. So, and I understand that you're aware of all of that, but I just want to make sure that we are, in providing a survey, getting back the data that we actually need to make the decision.
Thank you.
I think that it's also important that we try to remain as nimble as we possibly can, because this data clearly is changing hourly, it would appear, which doesn't seem much different than the way it was last year. But at the same time, scheduling a vote for what to do with virtual for next Monday is probably premature. Is there a way that we could shift that to a third meeting in August, closer to the time of school opening, or are we going to still have to vote next Monday on what we're going to do with this?
So I will put it out there to board members. Dr. Russell and I have certainly talked that with the amount of information coming in every day, that the most important thing is the health and safety of our students, and so that we want to be open as a board to having another meeting if needed. So if that's something that the board is amenable to, then I think we can look at getting that, scheduled on the calendar for an as-needed basis. We'll still vote next week on the things that are on our agenda, but should things change, we do need to be nimble and be able to meet again to make updates to our health and safety plan.
Yeah, I think it's important that we base our vote on a contingency basis that gives us the flexibility at a later point to make adjustments for updated information, including enrollment in a virtual plan, as well as whatever else comes down from the medical community as far as what's going to be expected of us for how to handle what we do in school.
Right, and we are required as part of the health and safety plan anytime that there's new guidance to revisit it, so.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we're not locking ourselves into something that is inappropriate.
The other thing that Mrs. Smith and I will do is to organize in greater detail some of the options that we have developed in our mind so that the board has that background, and we can also give you a cost benefit or a cost analysis. You know, we sort of framed out in a very summary sort of fashion last week. We can give you some more detail so that you get a better sense of what we're thinking about is really possible at this point and what costs might be associated with those ideas. So let's talk about health and safety. So some of the goals as we approach the upcoming year coming off of last year, very straightforward, but we want to operate our schools in a way that maintains the health and safety of not only the individuals that attend our schools every day, but also the larger community. There is a connection there. We want to afford all students the opportunity to attend school in person 5 days per week. And that's something that's being encouraged by all of the agencies that we look to for feedback and guidance. We also want to be able to offer a virtual instruction alternative to in-person school to those families that would prefer it. And we've been talking a little bit about that this evening. I'd like to see us conduct extracurricular activities in support of the social and emotional well-being of our students. We certainly realized last year that that time when our students were sort of kept into their house and weren't out as much as they were used to, they weren't connecting with others in the ways that they were used to, left us with some really important feedback. So we want to do what we can to maintain those activities and certainly meet the needs of all of our students academically, socially, and emotionally, which is really our mission. So on July 12th, our board approved the health and safety plan for the 21-22 school year. And if you were a part of some of those conversations in the community meetings or the wellness committee or here in public at the board level on July 12th, you were introduced to the simpler template that we've been presented this year by the state. So the health and safety template last year was quite complicated. This year, streamlined. It was 3 questions is really what we were asked to address. And number 3 gets into a little bit more detail and focuses on those mitigating measures that we hear lots about and layering those mitigating measures in our schools to avoid or prevent transmission of the virus. So we talked about how we as a school would operate. And I am well aware of the concerns around masking. We've heard lots of comments about that this evening. In the July 12th plan that was approved, masking was optional. And there were some considerations for thresholds. Right now, our local community metrics look pretty good. Incidence and positivity rates are fairly low. We're in that low region right now. That could change, and as we see the uptick in cases, I predict it will change. But right now, we're in the low region. So the original plan considered that. It considered those thresholds. If the community burden is heavier, chances are more likely the virus will come into the school community. That was sort of the theory we operated under last year. We were very strict with our mitigating measures. We did not see linked transmission in our schools, and in fact, very few schools saw linked transmission of the virus. They did a really nice job of protecting our students and staff. That was July 12th. Okay, so last week was a whirlwind of changes. On Monday, the Office of Public Health, Montgomery County Office of Public Health, is the health agency we look to. They have the most direct authority over the school districts in Montgomery County. We look to the Office of Public Health, or the MCOPH. They published their guidance last Monday, and it was very similar to what our July 12th plan looked like. It made recommendations about mitigating measures like masking, like testing, assurance testing, based on thresholds. On Tuesday, CDC came out and announced that they had updated their guidance, and their guidance had shifted to a recommendation for universal masking for all inside the school setting, not outside, but inside. And then on Wednesday, all last week, Montgomery County Office of Public Health also shifted to align their guidance to the CDC's and shifted from that masks are optional and considering those thresholds of burden to now what CDC has put out, which is we're recommending universal masking indoors. So that's where we landed last week. The other really important mitigating measure that's emphasized, and we certainly haven't emphasized it as much in our position as a school, is the vaccination. We know that a lot of our school community, students and staff, have been vaccinated, and that has demonstrated to provide some protection. So the CDC and OPH are also encouraging that, along with their universal masking. They're recommending that. So the question becomes then, what do we do as a school district now, as we were presented with this new information? And as Mrs. Evans-Brockett said, school districts are obligated to review their health and safety plans when new information is presented, when new guidance is presented. So what you see here is currently information that you can access on the Montgomery County Office of Public Health website. And they define for us still those low, moderate, substantial, and high ranges or levels of transmission. And last year, we paid attention to county metrics. What was happening in Montgomery County? What was the incidence rate or the percent positivity on tests in Montgomery County? So regardless if we're Perkiomen Valley or Norristown Area School District or Souderton or Upper Perk, we all look to those county data. This year, the Office of Public Health has shifted, and they're encouraging us now, they're asking us to look at our local community data. And they've provided us access to viewing that information and really observing it, how it changes over time. This is what it looks like currently for Perkiomen Valley, and this is based on the 6 municipalities. So right now, week ending, so it's a week behind, we'll get updated tomorrow. Incidence is 7.66, or about 8 per 100,000 people, and a percent positivity of just under 2 there. That's as of July 22nd. There will be new local data that's updated every Tuesday by the county, and you can access those metrics by clicking on that link if you're interested. So that's important for us to pay attention to, as is the updated contextual guidance that was published by Montgomery County Office of Public Health. And a couple of things to note before I get to masking. Physical distancing and social distancing has shifted now from 6 feet to 3 feet. So 3 feet is now acceptable. And an important note about quarantining and exposure. If I am a confirmed positive and Dr. Kolar is exposed to me within 3 feet or less, and we're both wearing masks, she doesn't have to quarantine. If she's vaccinated, she doesn't have to quarantine. So there has been a shift in how they're looking at and implementing the rules around quarantining. And that's something we're certainly focused on, because we know that our students missing school is not something we want to happen. So we were pleased with that. So that's something to call out. So we're aiming this year to have our students arranged at least 3 feet apart. And in a typical classroom, desks are pretty close to 3 feet apart. We're going to aim for a little bit more. If we have the space, we're going to do that. But it's 3 to 6 feet now. 3 feet is now physical distancing, or the recommendation. When it comes to masking, they are recommending universal masking indoors. So they're recommending that. And they're also indicating to school districts that you need to follow the CDC's mandate, which means students have to wear masks on buses. So, recommendation for universal masking indoors, a mandate that says students on buses need to wear masks. So that's where we are with this updated guidance. So what does this mean for us? This means a conversation for our board. We can certainly, as a board, our board and I can recommend something stricter than the guidance, but we can't be more lenient. So, correct. We can be stricter, but we cannot be more lenient if there are mandates. So right now, these are the recommendations that I am requesting our board consider as they digest, we all digest some of the new information that came out really pretty quickly last week. That masks are recommended, strongly recommended for individuals in our schools, that they remain optional when our students are outdoors. They are mandated on buses, again, based upon what the CDC and PDE is saying. And there have been some questions around that. However, we need to continue the conversations about that. And right now, both PDE and OPH are indicating students on buses need to wear masks. Our classroom arrangements will afford 3 to 6 feet, as I mentioned a minute ago, as will the distance between students in lunch. Students right now are being planned to sit at tables at lunch. We may spread them out in 2 areas at the secondary schools, at the elementary schools. Our principals are working diligently to provide at least 3 feet of physical distance between our students and lunch. I mentioned, board, the difference or the change in quarantining and the rules around quarantine, and factoring in, again, the distance between individuals masking or not masking, and then that vaccination status. Confirmed positive must still isolate for 7 to 10 days. 10 days typically, unless they get a negative test result on day 5, they can return on day 7. So there are still rules. These are rules we have no flexibility with when it comes to the Office of Public Health and their direction or guidance to us. We must adhere to the rules around quarantining and isolating our students should they encounter those circumstances of being exposed or becoming a confirmed positive. In all situations, we really want to encourage our teachers. We're working as an administrative team and with our staff to provide regular mask breaks throughout the day for our students that are wearing masks, and we'll continue with daily symptom monitoring. It is extremely important that anyone that comes into our schools, students, staff, visitors, if you don't feel well, if you have any of the symptoms that are on those tables that we look at, you don't come in. That's really important. There are a couple of other considerations that we're making as we think about the upcoming year and health and safety. As Mrs. Smith mentioned, we would like to distribute a survey and hear from our parents about your preference for an instructional mode based on the new guidance, what's happening out there in the community, the Delta variant, and your personal preference right now for your child. Our Meet the Teacher nights will offer attendance options to parents that include both on-site at this point in time and Zoom. So that hybrid model, we got some positive feedback last year. Our principals are planning to continue that into the upcoming school year. We'll have our students outside to the degree possible. Elementary students were requested to bring a beach towel as one of their supply list items. And that's really so when they go outside, whether it's for learning or eating, reading, that they have a place to sit. So we continue to encourage getting our students outside as much as possible. And we are focused on instructional supports and the academic accommodations that will support our students who end up needing to be absent for an extended period of time, as well as the supports for the current virtual option, as well as considerations, again, we've talked about this evening, for delivering virtual options, virtual instruction that will be as effective as possible for our students. So I encourage the board to consider the new information, the new guidance, the considerations administration is making, and in terms of next steps, I would like to be sure that administration continues to address any questions that board members or community members have, and we'll do that over the next couple of days before Monday, and revise the current plan to reflect any updated recommendations. So I'll revise a draft, provide it to the board and the public, communicate that updated information or those recommendations, and then request board action on Monday the 9th. And we will continue in an ongoing manner to monitor incidence and positivity rates at the local level, and then any guiding agencies that are offering us information, and continue to initiate discussions as they're appropriate. So at this point, I will entertain any questions that our board may have about any of the information that's been presented about the 21-22 Health and Safety Plan.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. That was very good and comprehensive. I have a couple questions about the masking recommendations, because it seems I'm detecting an inconsistency between what Montco is recommending and what I'm seeing in the CDC recommendations. I'm just wondering how to reconcile that. If we go to the Montco recommendations on consistent and correct mask usage, they say, in alignment with CDC, MCOPH recommends universal indoor masking for all teachers, staff, students, and visitors to schools, regardless of vaccination status or school district level of community transmission. And they reference the recent updates that the CDC put out on masking, on their masking guidelines. But then if you go to the CDC's documents, and I'm just looking at the key takeaways right now for the masking guidance for COVID-19 prevention in K-12 schools, updated July 9th, 2021. Under the key takeaways, the third bullet says masks should be worn indoors by all individuals age 2 and older who are not fully vaccinated. So Montco seems to be Montco seems to be recommending something more stringent than the CDC is saying, but they're saying that they're aligned with the CDC. Can we follow up with the Montco Office of Public Health to get some further clarification on that as to why they are going beyond the CDC's recommendation? Or is there something that I'm missing that I did not read far enough into the document?
I believe point 5 under the key talking points for CDC indicates that CDC recommends universal indoor masking for all teachers, staff, students, and visitors. So Montco's revised guidance was consistent with this. They're both recommendations. As you're aware from prior discussions, the United States Department of Education's interim regulations relating the ARP ESSER's grant program indicates that you're not required to adopt the CDC recommendations, but you must address how you will deal with those recommendations in your plan. I think the recommendation at this point from the district administration is to basically mirror MCOPH's recommendation and to keep and rather than requiring mask in school indoors, the plan proposes to recommend mask indoors.
If I may, the one thing I would add, Dr. Weston, is I had shared an audio of an announcement out of CDC last Tuesday, July 27th, and their web pages were not updated. So I agree with you. Their web pages, at least at the last check over the weekend, for example, still indicate the July 9th guidance, which is creating even more confusion,
Okay.
unfortunately, with all due respect. And I know that everybody is really trying to keep ahead of things. They have not updated their websites. However, they did come out with that announcement, and I shared that with you in the form of that audio clip.
Okay.
And that's what MCOPH is basing then their shift on Wednesday of last week on. That's what they're
Okay.
doing.
That disconnect is very confusing, and I'm glad that there's the clarification on that.
I have a question, and I actually just sitting here listening to your presentation just thought of it. I'm wondering, last year Bucks County and Montgomery County were pretty diametrically opposed actually in what they were recommending. Do we know what Bucks County is recommending? And I know that's not your job, or is that something we can?
I don't know. I can certainly confirm what people are sharing.
And I think all that Chester County's doing is deferring to the CDC. They're not even going any further than that. So they're just saying we defer to the CDC.
So the question that I have is with regard to the recommendations. What will be put in place with regard to requests for potential exemptions?
So in my view, if the health and safety plan is approved with masks being recommended, then there would not be a place for exemptions at this point. And maybe I need to clarify that. I apologize. That means they're automatic if that's the choice because they're recommended. Yeah, you don't need to have an exemption. Yeah, I'm sorry.
So then I guess my follow-up question would be, with the fluidity of the situation as it changes, your timeline was such a great infographic to show that by Wednesday, things had completely changed with regards to guidance. And looking ahead to not just the start of school year, but also, if we look at quarters, for example, just maybe by marking periods, where does the plan fall with regards to being able to be nimble enough to pivot to either more leniency or more stringent requirements? And then how would that, in other words, what's the look ahead plan to be able to revise?
I think that's a really important question to speak about in public or address in public because of all the changes that we've seen recently. And what I foresee happening is we will continue to monitor our local incidence and positivity rates, as well as the guiding agencies and the information that they share. And I think it will be discussion in committee, most likely first, either safety and operations or wellness, and then it will come to the board. And as Mrs. Evans-Brockett and I have discussed, if we need to have a board meeting maybe sooner than what is planned, I would certainly request that of her to consider that the board might need to convene sooner rather than later for either direction that would need to be considered.
So I guess my question would be from a legality standpoint, in having this be an open and transparent discussion, is there, because these things are so, Monday could be different than Tuesday or Wednesday, right? For us to have a reaction time to keep everybody safe, how will we be protected, and what will be in place to, number one, have the appropriate consideration and conversation, but two, be public about it? So that's that portion of it. Mr. Subers, maybe you can reply.
I would say, the one thing, the reason we're considering the plan or reconsidering the plan this evening is because you're required to do that upon any substantial change in the CDC guidance. So if that guidance changes, we're required to reconsider. We're also required to obtain public input each time we do that. But that would trigger our requirement to seek public input and to reconsider our plan. As far as the more myopic, local conditions, I would suggest that if conditions warrant, we schedule a special board meeting. It would be advertised. The purpose of the meeting would be advertised. Again, seeking or providing the opportunity for public input, and the board would consider the circumstances as presented.
I guess my thought is going into this year, we know so much more than we knew, obviously going into the pandemic, obviously initially, but then also going into last year. So I just want, to have a real solid game plan of all the pitfalls that we may come in contact with. And then to that end, I just was wondering if you could speak a little bit to the support that each building is going to get with regard to their ability to coach and help the student body pivot should changes have to be implemented.
Well, I wouldn't say that we're experts, but we got pretty good at moving through changes last year and adapting. And not only our staff, but our students did too. So we took away a lot from those experiences and have developed a lot of insights about what to do. I think our administrators, you see 3 of our principals here this evening, 1 from each level, they're working diligently on plans to set the stage for the what-ifs that we now need to think about as part of our everyday practice. So we've been talking about that as an admin team. They will in turn talk about that with their staff, and we will continue to. I am meeting with different stakeholder groups within the district to have some conversations with leadership. So we continue to try and get the word out. We'll send out a message to our staff once again tonight, once we have some idea of which way we may be going or what we're thinking about, so that we try and keep them all in the loop. So communication is key, and it's certainly something that our principals are focused on, all of us as administrators are focused on, and based on what we've learned from last year is really helping us to know how to navigate this year and hopefully get off to a smoother start and have smoother changes, more seamless changes if they need to happen. So hopefully that addressed what you were wondering.
Are there any other questions by board members at this time?
I just had a logistical question because we'll have to vote on adding the words recommended, right? And there isn't an actual agenda item that I'm seeing to vote on adding that to the health and safety plan. Is that correct? Or did I miss something?
It will be added for next week.
Do we have an idea of when we might be getting a final copy of the health and safety plan for review before the vote's taken?
How about if I aim to do that for you tomorrow? Wow. I certainly want to give you as much time as possible. This is really important considerations that you're making. And the changes, we've sort of called out some of them in the slides. I'll incorporate them, remove those threshold categories, and we'll get that to you tomorrow before end of day.
Okay.
Or before I go to bed at night, when sometimes.
Do you ever do that anymore?
Yep.
Going to bed at night? No, I don't want you to feel particularly pressured to offer us something to look at, especially if it's going to have to change at the last minute. But if we could get it even by Friday or Saturday, that would be plenty good enough.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Roberts. We'll try and get that to you tomorrow in all seriousness so that you have time then to read it, digest it, and share your feedback, share your thoughts, or pose your questions. But thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Russell.
I have a question. Can you go into more detail about the buses? Because it looks like that's something that's a definite change from the district's perspective, or I don't know what word. Anyway, it looks like a change. And what, I don't, what will happen if students want to not wear a mask on the bus? I would like more information about that, please.
I think that originally, there is an existing CDC order dated January 29, 2021, requiring masking on school buses, all public conveyances, including school buses. There has been articulated and continue to be articulated challenges to the authority of the CDC to enter that order under existing federal law. Based on that questionable authority, the district took the position that they would not require masks on school buses during the summer. However, it's in anticipation or at least waiting to see if there were any successful challenges to that authority. There have been no challenges to that order, to the CDC's authority to issue that order. Based on that and the the majority consensus of school districts in our geographic area to comply with that order, we are now recommending, or the district administration is recommending after consultation with me, to comply with the order. As far as students who exhibit or would have a need for an exemption under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Any student with a health condition that would warrant them not wearing a mask on a school bus can request that exemption from the district.
Does that exemption come from the district, or does that exemption come from the bus company?
No, it would come from the district. It would be processed through the district.
Any other questions at this time? No, please, this is important.
Okay, so to that end, to Mrs. Mayer's question, if masks in this new recommended plan, health and safety plan for the start of the school year, are mandated on buses but recommended in the buildings, then theoretically there could be a need for an exemption to be filed and on file for transportation on a bus, but once they get to the building, that exemption would not need to be.
No, because it's only a recommendation, it's not a requirement at school.
Correct. I just want to be crystal clear about that, because that is a contradiction to each other, right? Because, in other words, to say that there is no exemption required for masks being recommended only in the buildings, in order for them to get to the building, they would indeed need a filed exemption with a 504.
I would say it's a difference, it's not necessarily a contradiction.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll look forward to probably more changes in the upcoming week and discussion and vote for next week. Dr. Kolar, back to you.
Okay, so we'll move on to section 4.02, approval of curriculum guide updates. The recommended action will be a motion to approve the curriculum guide updates for elementary library, elementary English language arts, elementary health and wellness, and human genetics and bioethics as presented at the July 12th, 2021 board meeting. So the guides are available. Are there any comments or questions? Seeing none, can we move that to consent, please? Item 4.03, the recommended action will be a motion to approve the proposed allocations for Division of Federal Program Funding, Title 1, 2, 3, and 4 as listed. Are there any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, we will move 4.03 to consent. Item 4.04, the recommended action will be a motion to approve the proposed allocations for the ESSER 3 elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds as presented. Any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move 4.04 to consent as well. 4.05, the recommended action will be a motion to approve the 2021-2022 parent-student handbooks for elementary, middle, and high schools. And they are also presented. Any comments or questions? Okay, then we will move 4.05 to consent, and that concludes section 4.
Thank you, Dr. Kolar. That takes us to section 5. Mr. Jor is not with us tonight. Is there a board member who would volunteer to read this section? Okay, then I will read it. 5.01, a finance update. Mr. Weaver, please.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to provide a brief finance update. The good thing is there's no numbers in here. So we're not going to bore anybody. We're going to get right to it. The ESCO 4.0, we have a quick update on that. We obviously worked on and approved that in the springtime. We began work in earnest once the end of the school year really came to a completion. On June 7th, we actually got some wrenches in there and started ripping out some of the boilers. The boiler demolition work has been completed at Schwenksville, Skippack, and Evergreen. Additionally, the Schwenksville roof shingles are completed. by the gymnasium, and we're still working on some of the other areas as well. I do have a couple of pictures in here to make this a little bit more simple. The evergreen oil tank has been removed from the ground. Middle School East and Schwenksville has been abandoned in place. We had some conversations about that. We were scheduled to remove those, but because of the fact that we have electrical utilities around those boilers, we made the decision with Mr. Klemmer's help and CM3's help that we would dispose of them in place, much like we did the Middle School West boiler. Still tested, everything was okay. That was all part of mandatory. And the good thing is at the end of the day, the numbers in the ESCO were no different than when we abandoned in place. So that's a positive there. And we have ordered our chillers. Obviously, like everything else, we're monitoring those from a time perspective to make sure that there are no delays in those. So Evergreen and Middle School East will be expected to be delivered in early August, and we'll put them in the fall of 2021. Here is Mr. Mowry's quick update, and I'm not going to go through line item by line item, but you can see that it's different by a little bit, a couple of percentage points from 2 weeks ago that we shared. So we continue to make progress on this project overall. Keep in mind, this is a longer term project. It will go over the entire year as scheduled. Additionally, as I just mentioned, there are no issues with ordering at this point in time. Everything has been ordered with the exception of the water circulation pumps, but Mr. Mowry, CM3, and Mr. Klemmer are all working on additional backup plans just in case those circulation pumps don't come in on time. We think they're going to come in, but it's always good to have a plan B or maybe even a plan C. We do have good news on the natural gas pipeline. We do have an estimate from PECO, and that PECO estimate is within our estimate that we have used for ESCO 4.0. So good news is that it's within budget. The second thing is that this allows us to continue with that project and also continue negotiations with that building and construction and development that's planned for construction across the street from Middle School West, as far as having them try to maybe share in some of those costs. Looks like now they won't share up front, but we're really going to try hard to recoup some of those costs. It may be a couple of years out, but that's our plan, and we'll continue to involve Mr. Subers at a certain point in time to see if we can have some pretty serious legal negotiations to drag them in to help offset the cost. Here are a couple of pictures. It's always nice to show pictures. The Schwenksville roof is on your right. Skip-back water heater is part of that process, and the boiler pumps are sitting on the deck there waiting to be installed. Additionally, the operations and maintenance and custodial group, they've been working nonstop this summer. So a quick update for them. They continue to monitor the ESCO 4.0 process. They have also led the LVT floor installations at Skipback and Schwenksville, and the high school main office, that carpet is being replaced with LVT as well. The other building has been a little bit delayed, Evergreen, because we utilized it heavily this summer for our lift program. So we'll keep that on our docket and hit that up maybe next summer at this point in time. Hopefully, maybe we'll even switch some schools around and maybe gain some access at Evergreen for next summer. Continue to do cable wiring for the technology purposes throughout the district. We've begun the process for the building of the Viking Genius Bar. That included demolition and rebuilding of that Viking Genius Bar here at the high school. We installed the Frisbee Disc Golf Course at West, which was a foundation grant. Move forward with that. We continue to install multiple bottle filling water stations throughout our buildings. You may recall that was an early recommendation from some of the safety and wellness committees. We did have a stock of 18 of those that we had not been able to put in place because of the pandemic. We just didn't have an opportunity to. So this summer, we've begun that installation. We're almost near the end of the complete installation of the 18 throughout all of our buildings. We also installed an ice machine at our athletic field house, specific for athletic uses. We have begun and are in the middle of and near the end of our typical HVAC and AHU filter replacements. We all remember the MERV 13 filters. We're replacing those internally. And the AHU are the big ones on top of the roofs. Those are different types of filters, but we're working on replacing those filters in addition to the typical routines. We also had grounds crew with all the grass cutting and all the beautification projects that they continue to work on, install 9th grade field goal posts onto our 9th grade field. And again, painting within buildings and various repairs, yearly surprises that always pop up, in addition to the cleaning of all of the rooms. So our staff has their hands full, and they continue to do a really good job. Some pictures just to share. On the left-hand side is a completely installed water bottle filling station. And the pipe in the middle is important because I mentioned earlier that we have someone there to watch and monitor the ESCO 4.0 process on an occasion. Mr. Ed Beitler just happened to be up at Schwenksville when they were doing the borings around the Schwenksville boiler oil tank in the ground. They did the 3 that they were required to do, and they did a 4th one. And Mr. Beitler said, "Please don't do that because there are utilities there." Well, they did the 4th boring, and they put a hole in one of the pipes. Mr. Beitler was there, so there's no nefarious cover up there from the ESCO 4.0, like, ooh, look at what we found. Mr. Beitler was there. It was a stormwater drain, thankfully. He immediately contacted some individuals with some cables and some cameras to go down to see what kind of pipe it was. Right then and there, that was in the afternoon. The next morning, Mr. Beitler went up, watched them install that new sleeve and that new piping, inspected it, and made it okay. So those are the types of really good opportunities that we have with our staff and our knowledge. And Mr. Beitler just happened to be at the right spot at the right time. So we are constantly watching over these ESCO 4.0 projects just to make sure that they are doing what they are supposed to be doing. Any questions on the ESCO projects and the summer projects? Okay, thank you. Moving forward, we have been provided notice from the Department of Education and the Secretary of Department of Agriculture to be aware of potential increases for the food service procurement program processes. That is everything from driver shortages to production shortages to supply chain shortages to gas increases. They sent out an official notice and an official letter. It went to Dr. Russell, it went to myself, it went to Beth Yaksich, our food service director. So they are letting everybody know that you need to be aware that there could be some problems with food, whether it's supply chain or severe increases associated with those foods as well. Luckily, the school district is involved, actually started our own procurement service program with a bunch of other school districts. And so we feel that we are in pretty good shape to continue to procure the types of supplies that we need. We have been through this before, specific to the economic collapse in the early teens, when it was not unusual for them to add additional fuel surcharges on deliveries and actually stop delivering because we weren't big enough. Because of that result, we opted to get bigger with more school districts, and so we are now one of the meat eaters at the table, so to speak, that they have to take care of us first for our procurement group. So in that particular case, that helps us out tremendously. Additionally, other items that we continue to monitor, of course, we just passed our budget in June, and no sooner did we do that now, Amy and I are a little scared about some of the numbers that we had because now we're getting some economic indicators for, obviously, we've all been through the construction costs. We heard about that. Fossil fuels that we utilize, as an example, we do opt in with our MCIU procurement school districts for Montgomery County. And last year, our bid was 1.4032 cents per gallon for diesel, for instance. That price is now at the market rate as I created this presentation at 2.1516. And remember, those numbers continue to go up. Yes, that is a reduced rate because that's the benefit of the procurement. One of the ways that we offset that, this is for diesel, heating oil, and gasoline, is that we chose internally to go variable. So we didn't lock ourselves into either a set amount of gallons, and we did not want to lock in at a fixed price when the gas prices were near their highest. So yes, we're rolling the dice a little bit, going variable, in the hopes that these prices come back down a little bit as the year progresses. And in past years, we've fixed our number of gallons. So for instance, we had to buy at least 100,000 gallons of diesel fuel. This year, we're not set on that. So if we do happen to have some sort of a stoppage or something like that, we're not stuck carrying those gallons forward at that higher price for next year and the year after. So we thought that there was some power behind going variable. It is one of the few times we've gone variable. So in addition to that, We think that it'll work out, but we'll keep the board abreast of how we're working out. One of the other changes through the MCIU procurement is a switching of an energy provider. The MCIU is going back to Provident Energy, a long ago energy provider that we are now going back to look at in a block and index type of manner because the way that they do their theory is a little bit different than World Connect, which we've been utilizing over the past couple of years. Again, in addition, in a way to help us offset some of these price spikes that we anticipate. And yes, the reemergence of words like fuel surcharges and additional delivery fees we're looking at for our vendors. So far to date, in a tracking of all of our vendor supplies that we've had for our purchase orders. Obviously, our purchase orders go out in the summertime. They're coming in. We are not seeing any delays in any of our supplies. We do have our Chromebooks in now, so that's a positive. Other school districts are not so lucky. We are hearing some pretty bad horror stories as far as books and supplies and those types of things that are being delayed. They're getting notices after 6 weeks of a purchase order being issued that we can't fill it, go elsewhere. We haven't had that yet, aside from our Chromebooks, which we figured out and got lucky that they're in. So we'll keep everybody abreast of that as we move along as well. Moving on to the ad hoc committee, we continue to work on that. What we envision is we have myself, Mrs. Hurd, and Mr. Felty as 3 key providers. Mrs. Smith or Dr. Russell, 1 or 2. I'll settle for 1 at this point in time. 2 volunteer school board members. I do know Mrs. Evans Brockett has volunteered, and we do need 1 more. We need 1 of the high school principals and 1 of the middle school principals each, as those buildings are more directly impacted. And then a general mix mash of community reps, including parents, teachers, coaches, and students, all to review the student activity fees, the parking fees, all of those fees associated with all of our students throughout our entire district in a review status process to bring some additional ideas back to the school board in an effort to address the concerns that we've had over the past couple of years. Max to be about 15, and again, to be efficient with our work that we need to do. Any questions on that? Okay, thank you.
I have a question, but not related to what you just presented. I'm wondering about school lunches. If you could explain why this year breakfast and lunch is still going to be offered free to our students.
Sure. So that's a really good question. And so the seamless summer option, the SSO, is what it's called. We felt that it would be an opportunity for us to continue our community involvement. There are a lot of people that are needy, and the numbers for the uses of our grab-and-goes lunches certainly support that. We felt that that was the proper way to go. The additional kicker to that is that the federal subsidies reimburse us a higher amount than what we would earn on our lunches and our breakfasts as well. And so as a means of keeping a food service entity as a proprietary fund moving forward, a self-funding fund, we felt that that was important as well. So those 2 factors, certainly to be a good community member and a steward for those that are needy here. We will still continue to process the free and reduced lunch applications because those are necessary for Title I, as Mrs. Smith said. But yeah, the overarching reason was really to help out our community. We know our community's hurting. We know that oftentimes people don't want to talk about that, but if we can offer them some free lunches and some free dinners, that would be good stewardship. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Item 5.02, there's no report this month for grants or donations. 5.03, the recommended action will be to approve the extended school year contracts for summer 2021 to meet the requirements of students' IEPs. Are there any questions on this? Can move this to consent. Item 5.04, the recommended action is to approve special education contracts and cost of services for the 2021-2022 school year to meet requirements of students' IEPs through out-of-district placements and special services providing to students within our district programs. These contracts appear at this time following legal review and approval. Any questions on this? Move that one to consent. 5.05, the recommended action is to approve the 2021-2022 bus drivers, substitute drivers, and aides employed by STA pending receipt of the documentation required by PVSD and PennDOT. Any questions? Move to consent. 5.06, the recommended action is to avoid PO number 211586 to Troxel Communications, Inc. in the amount of $506,250, originally issued on April 14th, due to the vendor's inability to fulfill the order as placed. Any questions on this? Move that to consent. 5.05, the recommended action is to ratify the purchase of 1,350 Lenovo Model 5E Chromebooks for the one-to-one initiative at an approximate cost of $498,150. Any questions on this? Move that to consent. 5.08, the recommended action is to ratify the purchase of 2 steamer convection ovens, one at Schwenksville and one at Skipack, from Penn Jersey Paper via CoStar's contract number 036024 at a total cost of $28,190. Any questions on this? Move that to consent. 5.09, the recommended action is to approve an agreement with Premier Orthopedic and Sports Medicine Associates for professional services as a football team doctor for the 2021 season at a stipend not to exceed $2,000 pending solicitor review. Any questions? Move that to consent. 5.10, the recommended action is to ratify the renewal of a 2-year agreement with Substitute Teacher Service, Aston, PA, beginning July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2023 to provide day-to-day substitute teachers for the district. Any questions on this? Move that to consent. Item 5.11, the recommended action is to approve a settlement agreement and release in lieu of FAPE as recommended by the solicitor. Any questions on this? Move that to consent. Item 5.12, the recommended action is to approve a settlement agreement and release in lieu of FAPE as recommended by the solicitor. Any questions on that? Consent for that one. And 5.13, the recommendation is to approve a settlement agreement and release in lieu of FAPE as recommended by the solicitor. And we can move that to consent. And that brings us to section 6, payment of bills. Dr. Weston, please.
Thank you, Mrs. Evans-Brockett. Item 6.01, the ratification of bills and payroll and authorization of payments. And item 6.02, the approval of the treasurer's report and financial statements. Both of these items will be presented for action next week. That concludes section 6.
Thank you, Dr. Weston. Section 7, Ms. White, please.
Thank you, Mrs. Evans-Brockett. Section 7.01 is on consent. Section 7.02 is on consent. 03 is to request action to approve, it's motion to approve the provisional employment of the professional personnel as listed pending fulfillment of all statutory requirements. Are there any questions? Seeing none, you can move that to consent.
That's being asked for
I'm
action
so sorry.
tonight.
I'm sorry. May I make a motion to approve that? I'm so sorry.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
7.04 is on consent. 05 is on consent. 06 is the acknowledgement of superintendent's salary. Motion to acknowledge the receipt of the 2021-2022 salary for the superintendent in accordance with the applicable employment agreement. And I so move, right? We're looking for approval for that. No, that's good. Why am I so confused tonight? It's been a long night. I move that to consent. I'm sorry. 7.07 is a motion to create a new assistant superintendent position. Are there any questions? Seeing none, we'll put that on consent. 7.8 is on consent, and 7.9 is a placeholder for next week. And that ends my section.
Thank you, Ms. White. Section 8, support personnel. Mrs. Roberts, please.
I got the easy one tonight, Mrs. White. 8.01, 8.02, 8.03, and 8.04 are all on consent. And that concludes my section. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mrs. Roberts. Section 9, governance. Mrs. Mares, please.
Thank you. The following policies are presented for a first reading. 006, meetings. 006.2, meeting agendas, recommending that we retire that. 903, public participation in board meetings. 905, Citizen Advisory Committee. Are there any questions or comments? So I actually have comments. And I was on vacation during policy. The best thing for me to do would have been to go to the policy meeting, but I was unable to do that. I am actually in support of what Mr. Liggett brought to our attention. The policy on face value, when I read it, I didn't think it seemed okay to me, but I am concerned that I agree that we don't want to limit the public's ability to interact with the board, to come to meetings, to feel like they don't have a voice here, because wouldn't be, I just don't think that's how we can run our meetings. And I think putting a time limit on it and making people have to adhere to an agenda, I understand the motive or the why we would want to do that in this time of tumult and a lot of back and forth. But ultimately, I know Mr. Liggett sent us an email, and I would like to see us support what he is suggesting. I'm not in support of time limits and having in the beginning of the meeting that you have to put your comments to a certain agenda item. That's where I'm standing right now. And then I'm not really sure what we do with that, actually.
I appreciate your comments, and I can understand how at this time it would seem that we're looking to limit public comments. That is not the intent. It was a result, you weren't at our board self-assessment or our policy committee meeting. So these are recommendations that came from PSBA that are in alignment with most other boards in the state. In terms of speaking on an agenda item at the beginning, we're not limiting members or public ability to speak. It's just we need to hear those things at the beginning of a meeting because we're voting during a meeting, and the other items can wait until after.
Well, so I totally understand this. This policy is not being done in malice. But as I was thinking about it more, if you're a single mom at home and you really need to share something with the board, or a single parent, whatever, or you have a life situation that it makes it hard for you to come to a board meeting, if you sign in and you have to wait until the very end to be able to share what you need to share with the board, I think that adds another kind of layer or roadblock to somebody being able to communicate what they need to communicate with us.
This particular rule has only to do with board meetings, is that correct? It has nothing to do with committee meetings, it has nothing to do with, because I think the part of the problem, and once again, I think that it's important that people should be able to speak their mind wherever. But the thing that I'm concerned about is the fact that a lot of the information gets shared in the committee meetings. And that being said, nobody is being censored as far as that goes. The committee chairman or the committee people have a responsibility to report back to the board what was discussed in the committee meetings and what was said in the committee meetings, and that's why we have a system set up to be able to do that. So there's a difference between comments that are made at a board meeting, which we have no ability to respond to, and there is no ability to, there is no provision for any discussion. There's simply proclamations. Whereas in a committee meeting, those points are points of discussion where a conclusion can actually be reached and brought to a board at the end. So I'm wondering the benefit of allowing any sort of proclamation being made at a public board meeting when in actual fact the place where these things should be discussed is in a committee where a conclusion can be reached and where, you know, I mean, we get accused of sitting here with blank faces. Well, we have no other choice. We can't respond to you. We can't talk to you. There's no response.
I'd ask the audience to be respectful of the board procedures and wait for public comment time.
You know, I mean, it's important for us to hear you. Yes, it is important for us to hear you. And we hear you through your participation regarding these particular subjects in committee. Everybody has an email. Everybody has the ability to hear you. Everybody has the ability, but to come into a board meeting and just say what you want to say, and we can't respond to you, we can't discuss it with you, there's no, I mean.
Mrs. Roberts, let's have discussion among the board and not with the audience at this time.
I appreciate what you were just saying. I do. I really do.
We need to follow board protocol, Mrs.
Okay.
Roberts. Let's. I
So in
ask the
other words-
audience to wait until public comment. We have to follow board procedure.
In other words, what I'm saying is that I think that it's important that people should be given the opportunity to speak. But being given the opportunity to speak on the floor during the course of a board meeting on subjects that have nothing to do with what we are discussing at the time, to me is pointless and can become abusive. And I think that we have to make sure that we're following the board protocol and that mutual respect is important. And that means we listen, but what's the point if we can't have a discussion about these things? And the place for discussion is in the committee.
So I I'm curious, and I would like to hear maybe from people on the policy committee or from administration. So take, for example, the showing of the video clip at Middle School East that a lot of or some of our community was upset about. So they came to the board meeting to voice their concerns. If they are only to speak in committee, how would that work? I mean,
that would have been open for comment during section 10. They could, that is generally how boards proceed, is that during section 1, it's comments on any agenda items because we're voting. And because it is in policy that the chair of the board has the right to, if we have numerous comments and we're, it's about keeping the meeting flowing and not lasting 5 hours. And we have had board meetings where we've had to cut off public comment. And, nobody wants that to happen. And I think, again, what we talked about in policy committee was the most important comments for us to hear are the ones that we're going to be voting on that night. We need to hear about those. So that's why we would reserve section 1 for agenda items. Section 10 would be for any item.
Can I ask, just to follow up, I do truly also agree with the sentiment and the place in which Mr. Liggett brought that to the public's attention and to the board as a whole attention from the policy meeting, because he is diligent to not only coming both to committee meetings, but also board meetings and thoughtfully interacting and following the guidelines and rules, not calling out and not going outside of the realm of the actual procedure. He truly takes that very seriously, and I really respect that he always abides by that. So that being said, I think there needs to be some context put into how a revision of this policy would actually impact the overall meeting. So, for example, his comment about the policy comment would have been appropriate in the beginning of the meeting regardless, because it's on the agenda. However, when people come to air grievances at the very beginning of the meeting and take up an entire long duration and then leave as soon as they've said what they've had to say, the process of the board then is interrupted from efficiency of dealing with board's business. But they are welcome, and they still would be welcome, to stay throughout the meeting and wait until the end of the meeting, and then that item could then become new business for the following meeting. Is that a correct interpretation, Mr. Subers? Maybe you could just weigh in on the process.
It is a correct interpretation, and the separation of agenda items and non-agenda items is very common at board meetings throughout this geographic area.
But at all meetings that follow these rules of order, is that accurate too? Or is this just a school board related procedural organization?
Oh, I'm not, I can't comment on parliamentary procedures outside of school board meetings, and my expertise is school board meetings, but I can say that it is not at all uncommon and is very prevalent to have agenda items, comment on agenda items at the beginning of a meeting, and comment on any item of public concern at the end of the meeting.
Fair enough. Thank you for clarifying. And just to be clear, with regards to censure or time limits, I think that those guidelines, I'll sit here until midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning to listen to people's complaints once we've taken care of the business of the board. But I don't see that there's any reason to, there's no reason to be disrespectful and laugh. I've always listened to everybody's feedback and made thoughtful decisions based on not only the data that I'm given, but also the conversations that we've had to truly try to hear everybody's voice. So I just want to acknowledge that, Mrs. Mayers, that on face value, it does seem as though there would be some question marks, I agree with you, as to the ability to allow people to speak, but I just think that it's putting it in a different bucket. It's not, in my mind, really limiting anything, as Mr. Subers confirmed.
So I guess the issue for me is it putting up a barrier for somebody who might have a problem being here the whole meeting? I don't want to make a judgment on why people leave or don't leave or stay or don't stay. So the issue is, unfortunately, we can't, it's not like we can say, okay, at 9 o'clock, we're going to be on section 10, therefore, you come at 9. That's my concern. And I'm not sure what we do with that.
I think that part of the problem is that we've all experienced with, that we have actually been disrupted from doing the board's business. It's important that we are able to do the board's business, because that is our responsibility to the community, that is our responsibility to the school district, is to address items on the agenda and make sure that that business is taken care of. And if we are not able, or if we have that process disrupted so that we get to the point where we're not able to do the board's business, there has to be a line. There has to be a line. There has to be some sort of order so that we can take care of agenda items as well as listen to the concerns of the community. And Mr. Liggett, I will say that you have always been particularly good at following those particular rules. So therefore, that policy is not for you. Okay? Mr. Liggett has done his diligence, and it's very often he's sat here at 12:30 in the morning.
I don't have any more questions. I'm just not sure where that leaves us. I mean, I guess to take a vote, and I know.
This is just a first reading. There's still a second reading before we vote.
Okay.
So. And I apologize, I didn't have my mic on that whole time.
Good evening. Is this on? Yeah. Good evening. My name is Brian Hill, and I'm from the Lower Frederick Township, Perkiomen Valley School District. As to your comments regarding the agenda of a meeting, you're fairly accurate, and I apologize because I do agree with the majority of the people here. But much of the business of the board is the business of the board, to which is really not the business of the community. Oftentimes, the comments that you hear in the beginning, and you've heard this evening, is the interest of the community. And I would ask that you would reconsider the criteria of your meeting and allowing the public to speak first, so that you can truly hear what the hearts of the community are for our children and for our community. As to the idea of a time limit, I will tell you that in the Lower Frederick Township, they do have a time limit, but they do also offer an extension by either the superintendent or the president of the board to allow the person to continue. So there isn't necessarily an exact time. They do say that this is where, and as long as the person is conducting themselves in a matter that is congenial, in most cases, the board will allow them to continue. So I would ask you to reverse the comments of the public to be the first thing that you do. If people choose to stay and listen to the rest of the board, which is important, but not necessarily as important as what the community has to say to you, I'd appreciate you considering that as you move forward with more of your with your future meetings. And it would be great that we could have discussion, but again, that does have some interruption in what you need to attend. I would be open to hearing what this advisory discussion or committee that has been talked about this evening briefly about. This is where we can create this forum as a community that we can come to the board or board members to have more open discussion about what we as a community would like. So thank you very much for my time.
Seems odd if I don't come up here at this point. Robert Liggett, Perkiomen Township. I sure can. I think I can. Green? It's on. Yeah, it's on green. Anyway, sorry, Beth. Robert Liggett, Perkiomen Township. I really appreciate the fact that you guys had some discussion about the public comment thing that I wrote to you all about, and not sweep it under the rug. And the ironic thing is, we're getting applause lines from both sides here. So I think it is an important issue, not just to any particular portion of this community, but to the whole community. So I do appreciate you taking it seriously. As far as the parts of the public comment thing, as far as the, let's say, the rationale for changing it, we have PSBA, which does provide templates and examples for us to follow. We're also our own local board and can choose whether or not we want to follow that, because it is only an advisory position from them. So I think that this local keeping of the comments is something that this Perkiomen Valley sees as an important value, and I think we should keep it. The other things that we're talking about are other districts and other, let's say, agencies of governance and their examples. Now, as you know in the email, I did check quite a few different school districts to see what their policies are. But one of the ones that I found that really stood out to me was actually the county of, Montgomery County. The Board of Commissioners, their items in the beginning of the meeting, it starts with items on agenda topics and then is immediately followed by comments on any topic. This is the county that is able to do this. As far as I'm concerned, we could keep that in that one line item of comments on any topic, agenda or not agenda. It's good enough for the county of, Montgomery County, so I think it should be good enough for Perkiomen Valley. And I really hope that, and I understand this is on first read, so technically it goes back to committee, and so I hope we take a serious look at this and understand that I think it isn't just my issue, and I'm not fighting this because of anybody's particular viewpoint. I'm doing this because as a citizen, it's important for me to have this podium, this mic at the beginning of the meeting, because this is where it's going to make the most impact. Mrs. Roberts, you said, I know how to work the system, and that's true. So I emailed you guys. I was at policy board and made a statement. But you know what? Everybody back here has no idea what I did in trying to get this issue up. This microphone is an important thing for the entire public. And sorry knew that was going to happen to me one of these days. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Michelle Keating-Seibel. I'm a resident of Perkiomen Township. As I sat here this evening, I received numerous messages from neighbors, students in the district, and even my own children who overheard the disturbing comments from our community members and asked me to comment on their behalf. I want the board and administration to understand that in contrast with the comments tonight, they do not speak for all or even the majority. One speaker tonight stated that school was teaching facts and not acceptance. Sexuality and gender identity is fact. Please check the sources, and as commonly recommended in academic research, make sure that you're citing what has been published within the last 5 years. Some people are not cisgender and are not straight. This is not an opinion or a feeling or anything other than a fact. This is not a new thing, but this coming generation has decided to embrace acceptance regarding this topic as opposed to the hate and ignorance peppered through the comments this evening. Another speaker stated that their child came to them saying they were bisexual because they would be treated as special. I have a difficult time believing this. and that this happened, but I understand the point you're trying to get across. This is not a question of gender identity or sexuality, but rather acceptance and understanding. It sounds like an incredible opportunity to learn and a discussion that has revealed itself. Teaching children about sexuality and gender does not make them queer or want to be queer. My son is in fact bisexual. There was a time when he was confused about his sexuality, but because he didn't have the vocabulary to describe it, and when he came across the vocabulary to understand who he was, he did not decide to be bisexual. He finally understood who he already was and realized it was not wrong or abnormal. Let me repeat, it is not wrong or abnormal. I have heard endlessly about being scared of a virus and not wearing a mask to prove this sense of bravery, but can't help to see the irony when it comes to education. I can assure you that students like my sons, their friends, faculty, administration, and others are not looking to shove an agenda down your throat. In fact, keeping with the PV mission statement, the district mission statement reads, "We cultivate an inclusive community of learners empowered to grow intellectually, socially, and emotionally." To do anything less would be a disservice to our students. I commend the district for your commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and look forward to continuing to work together to cultivate an inclusive community for all learners. This mission has empowered my own students, and I know of many others, to grow intellectually, socially, and emotionally, even in this trying year. This mission has opened doors to a world beyond our district, and because of your commitment to that mission, I know that my children and their friends will go on to make the world a better place. So thank you.
Hello, I'm Megan McGuade, and I'm a student at PV, and I have to say I'm disappointed at what I've seen today through the behavior and words of adults in our community. I'm going to touch on some topics I heard earlier in the meeting. I accept everyone's opinions and parent choice, but I see things from a student's perspective. With mask wearing, it should be a student's choice whether they want to wear a mask or not, but please consider those who are immunocompromised or have family members who are immunocompromised. Like someone said, COVID is not going away, so we should try to keep numbers as small as possible. Secondly, race is an important subject to talk about. It is vital when learning about history and how we have changed over all these years. As a black student, I've experienced racism at PV, but I know that we can eliminate the majority of that with the support of parents and administration. But that doesn't mean it didn't happen and that it hasn't affected me as a person, because it has, and it would be a lie if I said it didn't. With LGBTQ curriculum, including gender expression, sexuality, and etc., if you're worried about gender expression, I can assure you it's not an identity crisis, as someone earlier in this meeting said. It is a person figuring themselves out and what they are most comfortable with. Students must feel comfortable expressing themselves, asking questions, and learning valuable knowledge for when they're older, especially in health classes. I myself am pansexual and a part of the LGBTQ community, and I'm trying to help this topic be more freely spoken about in school because it's important. It's okay if you don't agree with these values, but allow students who relate to the topic to learn. And it should never be okay when a student is hurt or attacked for just being themselves. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other public comments at this time, we'll move on to item 10.02. Comments from board members, and before I accept comments from board members, I'll just say that any comment by a board member is representative of themselves and not of the as a board of the whole. Are there any comments at this time? Seeing none, moving on to 10.03. Notice of video recording disclaimer. Per policy 006.3, all video recordings are subject to the following disclaimer. The opinions expressed by any members of the public do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of School Directors of Perkiomen Valley School District and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of School Directors of Perkiomen Valley School District hereby expressly disclaims any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public. Any unauthorized rebroadcasting of any video, audio, and/or still image of this meeting is strictly forbidden without the written permission of the Board of School Directors of the Perkiomen Valley School District. And with that, I will adjourn tonight's meeting.